Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good evening. My name is Zainab Chaudhry. I'm the director of CARE's office in Maryland. CARE is a Council on American Islamic Relations. We're the nation's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization. We want to welcome you to tonight's community webinar that CARE has planned. Our goal is to discuss new documents that our organization has obtained through an open records request of Montgomery County Public Schools. As many of you are familiar, over the last several months, we've been working with community advocates and organizers within the county in Montgomery County, Maryland, to restore the opt-out option within the public school system. And during today's community webinar, we're going to be discussing some of the contents and the findings within these documents that CARE has just obtained recently. And we want to disclose how these documents actually contradict what the school system has been claiming all along about why they decided to revoke families' rights to be able to opt out. Joining me today is my National Deputy Director, Brother Edward Ahmed Mitchell. He's going to be talking more about the findings within these documents. And we'll be also joined by Brother Hisham Garthi, who is the president of the Montgomery County Muslim Council as well. Edward, I'll let you take it away. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Zaina. I'm doing well, alhamdulillah. How are you?
Doing well, alhamdulillah.
Good. All right. Well, thank you so much. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam wa rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. May peace be upon you. This is Edward Ahmed Mitchell, the Deputy Director of CARE. Hope all of you are doing well. Thank you for tuning in tonight. So what we wanted to do is share with you some important updates about the ongoing issue with MCPS. As you all know, school starts next week. It is still very unclear what will happen next week. There's a federal court right now that is considering a lawsuit that was filed against MCPS. CARE is not part of that lawsuit, but we have provided some evidence and information that was relevant to that lawsuit. We are still calling on the school district to do the right thing as we have for months, but we're not holding our breath. We are continuing to do everything we can to make sure that there is all the pressure needed put on the school district to convince them that it is in their best interest and the best interest of all children to do the right thing by restoring the opt-out. This was the way to accommodate everyone's interests and everyone's desires and to make sure no one's rights were violated. Tonight, inshallah, we're going to discuss the latest response we received from our open records request. As you all know, months ago, when this controversy and conflict erupted, we did everything we could to try to resolve it behind the scenes, to try to convince MCPS to do the right thing. But for reasons that were not clear, they kept refusing to allow the restoration of the opt-out, and they were not providing clear explanations about why they canceled the opt-out in the first place. They also seem to be giving contradictory messages about what they were going to teach in class. Would they simply be using books with a more diverse set of characters? Would they be teaching concepts that normally arise in sex education courses? Would they be penalizing students if they happen to express traditional or religious viewpoints about those issues that might normally arise in a sex education course? The answers to these questions were not clear because of mixed messaging from MCPS. So we filed an open records request earlier this summer to get an understanding of what has been going on behind the scenes in MCPS. What have they been discussing? What have they been deciding? Why have they been deciding? And most of all, what are their plans for students? And why did they cancel the opt-out? And why won't they restore the opt-out? We now have answers to many of those questions, not because MCPS willingly answered them, but because the emails speak for themselves. The documents speak for themselves. The evidence speaks for themselves. And I'm very disappointed and sad to say that this issue is no longer just a matter of respectful disagreement. You know, the school views things one way, the parents view things another way, we view it one way, but everyone's acting in good faith. I wish I could say that is the case, but that does not appear to be the case because the documents we have found clearly indicate that the school system is saying one thing in public and saying something quite differently behind the scenes. They are expressing one intent publicly and expressing a very different intent behind the scenes. And I cannot describe it in any other way but to say that this is dishonest. They have not been honest with you, the parents. They've not been honest with the media, with the public, and even a federal court. And I tell you, as an attorney, I'm just shocked that this level of dissembling would find its way into a court of law where the truth matters. You can't just make things up in court to win a case. You have to tell the truth. So then, let's jump into it. What are we going to cover tonight? We are going to cover 3 claims that MCPS has made, and we're going to show why those 3 claims are simply not true. The first claim MCPS has made recently is that they canceled the opt-out option because too many kids were requesting it and this created burdens, disruptions in the school system. Now, this first point, let's pause for a moment, because this is not the only explanation they've given for canceling the opt-out, and it's not the first explanation they gave for canceling the opt-out. When they first canceled it, they said publicly, well, look, we need an affirming classroom environment, and the best way to achieve that is to ensure that everyone can have access to these new books without giving anyone a chance to opt out of the books. That was their first public explanation. When that did not satisfy parents in Montgomery County Public Schools who still wanted the opt-out option, then MCPS changed course. They said, well, look, the law doesn't allow an opt-out. The law allows an opt-out for formal sex education courses, but these are English classes, and therefore there's no right to opt out. Now, that explanation didn't fly because they were conflating two things. It is true that state law requires an opt-out for sex education courses. It is also true that state law does not mandate opt-out for other courses or other curriculum. But it is not true to say that state law bans schools from allowing opt-outs for other curriculum. And in fact, we found out in court that Montgomery County Public Schools' own policies say that students can indeed opt out of lesson plans and other activities if it would compromise their religious beliefs. And so when MCPS was confronted with this policy, they changed their story again. They said, well, okay, yes, it's not illegal to allow the opt-out, but see, the problem is it became too burdensome. There's an exception to their policy saying we don't have to allow the opt-out if it becomes too burdensome. So in court, for the very first time in court, they suddenly said, yes, it was too burdensome. That's why we canceled the opt-out. This belated explanation contradicts what they said before and publicly. They only brought it up when they were cornered in court, and it contradicts what they directly told the Muslim community when they privately met with Muslim leaders earlier this summer. So this is point number one. And to further comment on point number one, I want to bring on one of our guests, Brother Hisham Garti, who Zainab introduced. He is the outreach director for the Montgomery County Muslim Council. He's done, a great job trying to resolve the situation, trying to make sure that everyone's rights are respected. And we hope MCPS will listen to him and other community leaders. Now, Hisham, obviously want to bring you in because you were in a meeting with MCPS earlier this summer in which you specifically asked them, and they explained why they canceled the opt-out. And they did not say anything about disruptions in class, too many kids opting out. Tell us, Hisham, about that conversation you had with some of the top leaders in MCPS and what explanation they gave you in that meeting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brother Edward. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everybody. And again, everyone, I've been introduced by Zainab and by Brother Edward. I am indeed the Outreach Director, not the President of the MCMC, which stands for the Montgomery County Muslim Council. Back on May 1st, with Dr. Zainab Chaudhry, who is the representative or the director for the Maryland Office for Care, after weeks of trying to schedule a meeting with the superintendent, Dr. McKnight, and or her staff, we finally were able to attend a meeting with them. So in that meeting, there was myself, Sister Zainab, and about four representatives of the school district, among which were Miss Nikki Hazel, whom everybody knows by now, because, and I must say, I'm so disappointed because she gave specifically contradictory statements, right? Which in a court of law, typically, there'll be, she would have been perjuring herself. But also from Dr. Pugh, right, who's the chief academic officer. So obviously we haven't heard from hundreds of parents that were extremely concerned, a lot of whom were really alarmed by the actions of MCPS. There was no consistency whatsoever in the rollout of the program. There was zero consistency in the rollout of the opt-out, and there was much less consistency in the rescinding of the opt-out itself. So obviously, a lot of families were really upset. So upon reaching out to us, one of the number one questions that we asked is, okay, well, what kind of training? How did you roll this out? It was very clear through their answers, and I do quote, I'm going to give a couple of quotes here from Dr. P herself, that they had unfortunately no specific training given to any teachers regarding the rollout of the opt-out. And again, we asked, well, what kind of training did you have about the subjects or these books themselves? And they again confided that they had zero training, official or unofficial, done or provided to the teachers on how to handle any potential questions to these topics. When we finally came out to, well, walk us through how you came about to not only you did not let all the families know that they were able to opt out, then you rescinded the opt out. And when you rescinded the opt out, we heard from different families that some of them were told they could stay on this opt out for the rest of the academic year. Some who had already signed a letter of opt out requesting the opt out and were granted that opt out option, where all of a sudden this option was taken away from them with no other explanation from their principal than that the central office has said that that was no longer available. They told me and Sister Zainab, and now I quote, so what happened was we heard from a few families whose children were in classes, and when some of these children started leaving the classroom during the introduction of the texts, right? These people started having their feelings hurt. So they felt offended and they complained to us. Based on that information and upon advice from our counsel, we chose to rescind the opt-out altogether. However, and now I'm still quoting, right, by Dr. Pugh. However, we were very clear in instructing all principals that any family that had already opted out, in other words, that had submitted a letter requesting the opt-out, that they were going to stay in the opt-out for the rest of the academic year. But going forward, that option would no longer be available to anyone else. End quote. So when I raised the concern that, well, this is not what we're hearing from teachers, I mean from parents and from so many families, what do you have? Why would you put the feelings of few over those of so many others? Number one. Number two, why was there, or what type of consistent or training, etc., was there? And again, the answer was, well, we really felt that this was the best way. The opt-out was counterproductive to basically the intent of inclusivity for all. Again, we had another objection to that. And then regarding the training or lack thereof, they said, yeah, and unfortunately, really, we just had the principals together in a virtual conference and we told them about that. So there was no real training given. Now, if I may add something,
Hisham,
yes, please.
Can I pause you for a sec? Because because there's something very important, that not only are you recalling this from your memory, but you took written notes during this meeting. Yes, which is why you're able to so adeptly recall what was said, that you wrote down the explanations MCPS gave. Carry on.
100%. And this was corroborated by Dr. Chaudhry, who was there with me at the same time, because her and I discussed this after we left that meeting. Because both of us were really left puzzled, right? Well, how can, number one, there was such a lack of professionalism throughout. It was very, very clear that there was no process whatsoever that was followed. Second thing that was clear to both of us is that there was nothing about disruption or about inclusiveness or inclusivity of all, because the moment you choose one small faction over a bunch of other smaller factions, right? You choose to pursue one point that favors a small minority over a whole bunch of other minorities, right? Then obviously you're trying to push a point. And so both of us were discussing it and we're thinking, well, clearly there's a political agenda here, because what they're saying really does not bode well with what they're claiming their objective was, right? Especially since when we asked them, well, at which point of time have you brought any parents to discuss these matters with them? Who did you consult with to find a compromise, right? Between those who feel very strongly about their faith and choose to teach their families about such faith, and between these topics that are so, yes, everybody needs to be included at the school and feel safe at the school, but it cannot be at the price of other people's religious freedom. They said, well, unfortunately, we don't recall having any such meetings, right? Now, mind you, we at MCMC are as a 501c4, right? We are the liaison between our community members. In other words, all the Muslim Americans who happen to reside, whether temporarily or full-time in the county. And we happen to play a much bigger role at the state level as well. We're so well connected. And so everybody that knows us knows that we do play a role of a liaison between all of our elected officials, including in the past, the school system, right? So the school system knows, because we've had meetings with them regarding Eid holidays and other matters. At no point of time have we heard from them about anything of the nature. At no point of time have we heard from any family that anyone was called into any meetings whatsoever. So we brought all this up to them, and they said, yes, no, sorry, we understand. So we then they finally said, well, we hear your concerns. We're going to take it into advisement. We'll let you know if we decide to change within the next couple of weeks.
Now,
yes,
go ahead, Sean. Was there more? Go ahead, please.
So just for the sake of time, because I will have to leave, unfortunately, in the next few minutes. One of the things when you do advocacy and you try to, I always tell all my colleagues and all my friends and everybody, whether professionally or socially, etc., that you have to understand whenever you're elected into office, whenever you start holding a post of responsibility, right, a position of responsibility, that you put on a different hat, and that hat has to match the responsibilities that are thrown upon you that you've taken on. Right. One of them, if I'm an advocate for the community, whenever I speak, I should speak on behalf of the community. And whenever I try to advocate for something, it should be for the benefit of all, if not the greatest majority. Right. It was very clear, and it is so disheartening to me personally, as a parent, as a resident of this county, as an immigrant who chose to make this great country my country, right? I was not born here. So the United States did not choose me. I chose it, right? Because of all of the values, and because the Constitution that I think to be, and I really hold to be, the second most interesting and most important document in the history of the world after the Quran for me, right? So to see that everything that this MCPS, these people that claim to care for the safety of all have done, and I'm trying to find the right words to use for not saying lies, but really these statements that they've made that are extremely contradictory. And I'm trying to be very generous here, right? From people in charge of educating our youth. This is the future of the United States of America. We used to be the beacon of everything that was good in the world. And our education system was one of the best. Montgomery County, not too long ago, maybe a decade ago or so, used to be the top 5 counties from an educational perspective in the United States. What are we doing with making statements just so that we can push one agenda? I don't know what's the reasoning behind it. But it's very disheartening to see that we were not the only ones that had concerns, that they did not listen to anyone that had concerns, did not consult with anybody regarding this matter other than one group that we know for a fact, and that I am sure a subpoena of documents will further show to the courts. But not only that, but their actions have created deep disruption in basically the academic well-being of our children, because now they've unnecessarily created so much friction between groups of minorities. I mean, we've all seen what's been happening at the rallies, right? I've heard from hundreds and hundreds of parents and of families whose children are now no longer feeling safe to go to school because they happen to follow a religion. They don't feel comfortable speaking their minds. Isn't that what school is supposed to be?
Yeah, that is what it was for me, for the most part, when I had the pleasure of going to public school. And there are things you're going to hear, Hisham, as in school that might make you uncomfortable, that you may disagree with. That's part of school. But what we always understand is that there's a certain point and there are certain topics that parents have always had the right to say, I want my kids to learn about that first at home. And that's especially things related to relationships and family and sexual relationships and things of that nature. And so that's why states across the country recognize the right to opt out from sex ed courses. And by the way, Hisham, I think you confirmed this, that most of the past school year, there weren't protests. There weren't petitions, that everything was okay. It wasn't a perfect system, but everyone was able to do what they wanted. Those kids, those parents who wanted their kids to learn about relationships and things in English class, pre-K through 12, were able to do that. And those parents who said, I want my kids to learn about that later in their school years or at home, were able to do that. It was a way to accommodate everyone. And I think it's very important to know the Muslim community didn't pick this fight. In fact, you and others tried desperately to avoid this conflict. And sadly, the school district has forced all of us into a bit of a corner. Go ahead.
And it's not just the Muslim community, right?
Yeah, that's important.
We have people of religion, people of faith. Listen, we Muslims tend to live much more according to the guidelines that were given to us by religion, because most of us, right, especially in this country, we tend to be a little bit more educated, a little bit more in tune with the nuances that are meant to really guide your life and lifestyle here. And we tend to be happy with it, right? And by and large, we feel that our life in the United States is not compromised by us being religious or people of faith. That to the opposite of it, right? This is what makes this country one of the best places on earth, really, to live, quite frankly, because we're all supposed to be, regardless of how we feel towards certain topics, right, to be able to live with one another. And we all have the freedom, like you said yourself, and I could not have put it more eloquently, to walk away when there is something that's presented to us that we deeply disagree with, right? In other words, live and let live. And since you started talking about the Muslims, and this is what we told so many people since then, listen, the Muslims are now feeling disenfranchised by everybody, really everybody, especially those that have any sort of that hold any sort of positions or official offices in the United States, because for the longest we've been saying, listen, live and let live. We have what we believe in, what we believe, but everybody has the right to do whatever they want, so long as they don't touch us. Well, now in this school system, you're telling our children and us as parents, hey, no. You no longer get to leave, right? If you don't agree with something that's so highly controversial. And oh, by the way, that studies have shown that it should not be presented at this stage of life. Now, one thing that I remembered, I'm sorry, it was apparently they had said during that meeting that it was by choice that they chose to introduce these topics at the elementary level.
Which is part of the controversy, that
yes.
That it's not as middle school and high school, but starting in pre-K. And I think it was the elementary school principals, not us, but the elementary school principals, who expressed concern that the book meant for pre-K students would teach students how to identify a drag queen. And obviously, the elementary school principals said, well, that's not appropriate for that age group. Not Hisham saying that, not any organization saying that, but the elementary school principals within MCPS expressing that concern. And again, Hisham, as you noted, a big problem here is the lack of transparency. This unwillingness just to communicate.
And Brother Edward, and frankly, I mean, again, I'm sorry. I really, I'm trying not to use the word lies, but the contradicting statements.
Yeah, which we're going to get to more, because we have other points to raise. Yeah. Absolutely. All right, Hisham, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know you've got to go, but thank you for sharing your perspective as a parent. And I want to note that Hisham and MC, they not only are saying this, they put their money where their mouth is. They filed a sworn affidavit with a federal court recounting the conversation that they had with MCPS, in which MCPS gave a completely different explanation for why they canceled the opt-out compared to the explanation they gave in court months after doing so. And I would also note on this point that Montgomery County 360, a local media outlet, filed an open records request. And what they asked the school district was for this: give us anything you have, any emails, any numbers, any data, any documents, anything at all to substantiate your claim that too many kids were opting out, and that's why you had to cancel the opt-out. You go read that article in Montgomery County 360, because there they quote the school districts admitting, we don't have anything, not a single email, not a single chart, not a single number, nothing, not a single note, nothing at all about the issue of too many kids opting out, about that being the reason the opt-out was canceled. They couldn't even say how many kids had opted out of these lesson plans. And so they have now admitted, MCPS, that they have no evidence whatsoever to substantiate the claim that they made to a federal court. I'm a lawyer, and I'm just stunned. I mean, I'm honestly stunned.
Edward, I'm gonna let you in on something else. So not too long ago, we've arranged a meeting with a high-ranking county official. So this is not part of MCPS era, but just so that they understand from some of the parents, right? That we wanted them to hear that this is not just something that, you know, a few Muslim leaders or a few people that really want to counter, you know, open-mindedness, etc. No, not at all. And by the way, our organization is nonpartisan, so we really we don't care. One of the parents stated that when this started happening, they actually asked their principal for numbers of students that had opted out, and they were given maybe a dozen throughout the school, throughout the whole school. And I'm sorry, before I left, I was just checking the messages, and it looks like there was a question asked by someone.
Exactly. The question is, were families who were initially promised the opt-out able to keep using it during the rest of the school year? I believe that's what they said. What happened? That even though it was canceled, those parents who had already secured the opt-out would be allowed to keep it. Go ahead. Feel free to comment on that, Sean.
So yes, that's such a wonderful question, because in case you did not make it out from my statement earlier, right? That the school, the central office, or Dr. Pugh and the team that was there told us that was their instruction to the group of principals during that virtual meeting that they had with them. In other words, they had promised any family that had been granted the opt-out for their child that opt-out would stay in force through the end of the calendar year. However, when we spoke with families, there were too many families whose opt-out was taken away from them completely the moment that meeting happened.
So again, this mixed messaging, chaos, and
no transparency, extreme mixed messaging.
Yeah. All right, Hisham, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing some of this information with us. Thank you for, again, putting this on the record before a federal court, which now has this information. So I want to thank you greatly, and we'll see you soon, inshallah. And I'm going to move on now to point number 2. But thank you, Hisham. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on now to the other 2 issues that we want to share with you. I'm going to share my screen so that you can follow along with us, inshallah. And my producer just let me know if this isn't coming through. But right now, you should be able to see a document that we put together that will highlight some of the other issues that have arisen. So we already covered claim number 3. The most recent claim they made was, well, we canceled the opt-out because too many kids were requesting it. Correct. This was the most recent claim that they made. Now, we've just established that is not true. We know that is not true. There's no evidence to support it. They said something completely different when they met with parents. And so we know that's not true. But now let's move on to 2 other important claims they made that the evidence now contradicts. Claim number 1, MCPS has repeatedly said, look, we understand there's an opt-out from sex ed courses. And we understand that we have been giving an opt-out for these lessons because, you know, the topics here are things that parents find very sensitive and that they would normally be covered in sex ed. But we're not going to grant an opt-out because we're not teaching anything related to sex ed courses. We are just using books that have a greater diversity of characters, just letting people see themselves in the books. And we're not giving any formal instruction related to issues that would normally arise in a sex ed course: gender, relationships, family life, sexual relationships, romance, nothing like that. That's what they have said to the public and to the court. But now we know that's not true. And we know this because of elementary school principals who almost a year ago wrote a detailed memo to the school district saying that what the school district is telling the families and the public is not what they are being told, what their teachers are being told. Their teachers are being told to explicitly teach concepts related to family life and relationships and gender and sex that would normally arise in a sex ed course. And so let's look at a piece of evidence that we found. So as you all know, because this was a few weeks ago, in that memo that elementary school principals wrote, this is from that memo. This is the memo elementary school principals wrote. They excerpted part of another document. And this document, the fuller document, is called Sample Student Call-ins. This was a document that MCPS gave to teachers. And in this document, there's a long list of statements or questions that kids might make in the classroom in response to the lesson plans teachers are giving. And on the other side of this chart, the school district lays out the answers that teachers can or should give to students. Now, we didn't have the full document. All we had was this brief excerpt that the elementary school principals pulled out and flagged as concerning. We reached out to MCPS and said, look, we need to see this full document. You should have given this to us in response to our original open records request. They refused to do so. So we had to file a new request to get the specific document that these elementary school principals were so concerned about. So you've already seen, most of you should have seen this. This is an excerpt. But now we have the full document. And in the full document, a few things stick out. One, that the school district is only telling teachers to push back on, to criticize, to try to silence students who express critical views, ask critical questions, or express traditional or religious views about topics related to families and relationships. If students express a different view, they support the curriculum, they have a more, you could say, secular or liberal viewpoint, no pushback against those kids. And so this raises a very obvious problem, which is anti-religious discrimination in violation of the First Amendment, and also a free speech violation. That the school district is singling out one group of people for their speech and telling teachers to push back and silence those kids, but other kids who express the different view, that's okay to express. So let's look at some excerpts from the full memo. This is the full document, the fuller document that was given. We're just going to go through a few items here. I'll ask our producer to put a link to our press statement in the chat. And in that link, you'll find links to all these documents. You can see the full things for yourselves. But what you'll note here in these documents is that anytime a student expresses a view that you could say is conservative or traditional or what have you, there's a direction to the teacher given to either silence that student, to tell them that what they're saying is wrong, is factually incorrect, or it's hurtful, and that we can't use those words. So, for example, if a student were to say that they believe in a binary sex, that there's male and female, and these two things are different and cannot be interchanged, the teachers are told to say that's not true, and you can't say that. Those are harmful words. If a student expresses similar views about anything else, the teachers have been instructed to say more than once, and I'm quoting here, the teachers have been instructed to do this: disrupt the thinking, disrupt the either or thinking of the students. This phrase you'll see appears in the document more than once. The school district telling teachers to disrupt the thinking of students. So this obviously was of concern to the elementary school principals because, you know, it's very explicit that teachers are being told that they need to change the way students think, disrupt their thought process, get them to think a different thing, have a different opinion than the opinion that they hold. And you see this phrase more than once: disrupt the thinking, disrupt the thinking. And so this was obviously a major concern to the elementary school principals, but more importantly, this contradicts what the school system said. They said in court, we are not going to be teaching anything that would normally arise in a sex ed class. We are just going to be showing characters, no instruction about the issues. That's not true. Not true at all. And we see that from the document given to the teachers, who have been explicitly told to teach concepts that normally are covered, and many would argue should be covered in sex ed, but English teachers are now being told to teach these subjects, and they haven't been given the training to do that, at least as of last year. So point number one, this is not true. MCPS claimed we're not giving instruction. That's not true. They definitely are. They also claim that there would be no backlash for students who express traditional religious views, that if a Muslim kid or a Jewish kid or a Catholic kid or even a secular kid expresses a traditional view about any of these, sensitive family life relationship issues, there won't be any attempt to make them change their mind, to penalize them, to silence them. And again, we know that's not true because we can see from the document given to the elementary school principals that that's exactly what the teachers have been told to do, to push back on students who express traditional or religious, or you could say conservative views, that those views will not be acceptable in the classroom, that they will be pushed back upon. And so this, I, like Hisham, hate to use the word dishonesty, but I struggle to find a better word to describe a school district that says one thing in court and another thing behind the scenes, one thing to families and another thing behind the scenes, one thing to the media and another thing behind the scenes. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to ask our producer here, if he can, to share for us the second document that was provided to caregivers, that was provided to teachers to use if they get responses to caregiver questions. That is, if parents have questions about what is being taught, we want to see what exactly was MCPS telling teachers to tell to parents. Let's put that on screen if we can. Thank you. So here in this document, if we can maybe zoom in a bit on this, our producer, if possible. So if parents came to teachers and said, for example, why should my child learn about issues related to gender and sexual identity and things like that at school, the response the teachers were supposed to give is, we are not giving any instruction about these topics. All we're doing is letting people see diverse relationships and gender expressions, but we're not giving any instruction about those topics. Those topics will be covered in sex ed. Well, again, we know that's not true. MCPS is clearly, literally telling their teachers to tell something to the parents that is not true, because the documents show that while the MCPS is saying to parents one thing, they're telling the teachers to do something else in class. Let's scroll down further, please, producer. Next, if a parent were to ask, is my child too young to be learning about these things? Well, the MCPS is telling teachers to say it's never too early to learn about these topics. And further, they're claiming that all of these topics are age appropriate. What they're not mentioning is that there was and is intense debate within MCPS about whether or not the content is age appropriate. The elementary school principals wrote this detailed memo saying, actually, we don't think some of this is age appropriate, that some of these things, whether it was any sexual orientation, heterosexual, homosexual, but some of the content is just not appropriate for pre-K kids or kindergarten kids or fifth grade kids. So this is what the elementary school principals are saying. But in the public statements that teachers are supposed to give to parents, no mention of this. Let's scroll down further, please. The next question, if a parent asks, well, look, these ideas that you're sharing go against the values we're instilling in my child at home. Are you trying to teach my child to reject these values? The school is supposed to say, absolutely not. We're not doing that at all. But again, you all just saw in the other document that was given to the teachers, that's exactly what they're doing. That if a student expresses a traditional, quote unquote, view about family life or relationships or sex or gender, the teachers are told to tell them definitively, you're wrong. That is not true. That in fact, here is the truth that contradicts your religious beliefs, your traditional beliefs. So again, we have this dichotomy, telling the parents one thing, doing something else inside the classroom. We can stop sharing this. We can go on further, but in the interest of time, we're gonna pause here. So these documents, there's more to them. You can see those documents by clicking on the link that is in the chat on Facebook. And you can see the documents for themselves. And I would also note that we have over 100 pages of emails from within MCPS about the opt-out issue that were sent or received by some of the top leaders of the school district. And what is very clear from looking at those communications is the chaos within the school system, confusion within the school system. It's very clear they were under intense pressure from an outside advocacy group to speed things along, to require this curriculum and to make sure that all students were exposed to it, no matter their religious beliefs. But what we also see is no effort to reach out and understand the other perspective, the concerns of parents who are not asking for any books to be pulled from the school system. Let's be very clear. No one is asking for these books to be taken out. All parents are asking for is the school district do what it said it was going to do. Allow the right to opt out. That same right to opt out that kids can do for Halloween celebrations and for St. Patrick's Day or for swimming class that they don't want to address. That same opt-out that the school system says can apply to lesson plans that would compromise the students' religious beliefs. That's their rule. All the parents are asking for is to restore that opt-out. Sadly, MCPS has not only not done that, but they have dissembled. They have been dishonest about why they won't do it. And they've been dishonest about what they're teaching in class. So as we wrap up tonight, I would just want to answer the last question posted in the chat, which was in the FOIA documents. MCPS said they wanted to control the narrative. What do they mean by this? I dare not get into their head to try to explain what they meant by control the narrative, but I think that you all can draw reasonable conclusions about what they meant when they said we want to control the narrative. And it's very sad they're thinking about this as a PR issue and not an issue of student rights and student health and student safety, because those things should come before any concern about public relations or politics. Now, with that, if there are no other questions, we're going to wrap up tonight. Again, click on the link to see more documents. 2 upcoming things to know of. Number 1, we expect the court overseeing the lawsuit that the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty has filed against MCPS to issue their ruling anytime. Could be tomorrow, but we expect that ruling to come sometime before school starts next week, and that will let us know whether or not a court is going to force MCPS to restore the opt-out. On August 24th, I believe this Thursday, there is a rally scheduled outside MCPS school board headquarters on this issue, and so we certainly encourage Muslim parents and others to participate in that and to be respectful and civil, as we have been for months, and that's been a great thing that we can disagree respectfully, and so we encourage parents to do that once again. And obviously, if you're concerned about what's going to happen next week at school, please reach out to CARE, other organizations working on this issue, and we'll try to make sure as best we can that your rights are protected when school starts next week, inshallah. I want to thank you all so much for joining us, and we really hope we can share good news about this issue soon. A respectful resolution that respects the rights of all students in the school system. Until then, hope you all have a great night, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you.